So we always talk about and recite prayers about and think about all sentient beings and our wish to benefit them, to reach enlightenment for their benefit. Let's take a moment to think about those sentient beings. So it includes all the human beings on the planet, or I don't know now how many there are, more than 7 billion, and growing all the time. And then there are others as well, animals, all the beings in the animal realm, who are far greater in number than human beings. And even greater in number are the hungry ghosts that we can't see, but we are told about. And then there's the beings in hell, who are said to be the greatest of number. And there are also celestial beings, beings in the various god realms, the deva realms, we also cannot see. So it may be difficult to think about all those beings, especially the ones we can't even see. They're not visible to us. But we can just imagine that they are there. And just get a sense for how many there are. There's so many. And they're suffering. Different kinds of sufferings. Physical, mental, both. And all those sufferings come about because of ignorance. That's the root of all sufferings. Not knowing the true nature of things. Not seeing the reality of things, even though it's right in front of their nose. But we just can't see it because our mind is so heavily obscured by clouds of confusion and ignorance and other disturbing emotions. And the Buddha was once a sentient being like us, suffering, confused. But he found a way out, a way to emerge from this situation by realizing the true nature of things, how things really exist. And in that way he cleared up his own confusion, brought his mind to the state of full enlightenment, Buddhahood, awakening, and then taught how it could be done so that the rest of us could follow in his footsteps. So we're so fortunate, incredibly, inexpressibly fortunate in this life that we've had the chance to meet these teachings and embrace them. Feel so strongly about them that we've decided to give up everything and just devote ourselves full time to studying and practicing the Buddha's teachings. But we always need to remind ourselves again and again, the real reason for doing this is to help others, to help all those other beings who are still lost in confusion, darkness, and incredible suffering. And they've been kind to us numerous times in this life and in our past lives. So it's only right that we repay their kindness by helping them to the best of our ability. Being kind, non-harmful, helping them in whatever needs they have, but also helping them by developing our own minds, our wisdom, our compassion, our qualities, and reaching full enlightenment, Buddhahood. So then we can lead them to that state as well. Okay, so last week we started reading through this text by Lama Tsongkhapa called The Illumination of the Thought, translated by Jeffrey Hopkins. So what is this a commentary to? Okay. Chandrakirti's supplement to the middle way, Madhyamikavatar in Tibetan and Sanskrit. And that text, Chandrakirti's text, is also a commentary to what? Treatise on the middle way, yeah. It's also sometimes called the Fundamental Wisdom. It has various titles. Then, and Nagarjuna's text is a commentary to, yes, Perfection of Wisdom Sutras by the Buddha. All right. So we're studying a commentary to a commentary to a commentary. That's how it goes. As time goes on, things get more degenerate. It becomes more and more difficult to really understand what the Buddha said. So we need all these commentaries. Okay, so then last week we got up to the part where it was explaining the meaning of the word hearer. So we're still on the first line of the first verse where it says, hearers and solitary realizers are born from Buddhas. So now Lama Tsongkhapa is going into an explanation of hearers and solitary realizers. So let's continue reading. This is page 10, the first paragraph where it starts, someone. So just before this, Lama Tsongkhapa explained the etymology of the term hearer. In Tibetan, it's nyenta, which literally means listener, hearer. But in English, we just say hearer. But listener, hearer, and that means that they listen to the teachings, meditate on them, attain their goal, nirvana, and then they cause others to hear about that. They make some proclamation that lets others know that they've reached that goal. And there's another term, it's actually the Sanskrit term, Shravaka, which in Tibetan is trodrog, and that means hearing and proclaiming, because they hear from the Buddhas about Buddhahood and the path leading to Buddhahood, the Bodhisattva path. So they hear about that, and then they proclaim it. They talk about it to others, even though they don't practice it themselves, but they still talk about it and, praise it. So that's another etymology. And then there was a quotation from the White Lotus Sutra, which is a Mahayana Sutra. And it says, "O protector," this is on the bottom of page 9, "O protector, today we have become hearer proclaimers, Shravakas. We proclaim the excellent enlightenment and also intensively set forth the terms of enlightenment. Hence, we are like adamant hearers." So the people saying this, the speakers here, are actually bodhisattvas. But they're saying they are like hearers because they hear about enlightenment and they proclaim it to others. Okay, so then there's a little bit of a discussion about that verse, and Lama Tsongkhapa says, someone, Jayananda, indeed says that because the word excellent is absent in the third line of that quote, the former enlightenment is the great vehicle enlightenment, and the latter, the hearer enlightenment. So what Jayananda says is the word enlightenment appears twice in that verse. And he says the first time it's the great vehicle enlightenment, Buddhahood, and the second time it's the hearer enlightenment. Because enlightenment, the word enlightenment is also used for the nirvana attained by hearers and also solitary realizers. So when you use the word enlightenment, you got to clarify which enlightenment are you talking about. It isn't only referring to Buddhahood. So then Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't agree with that explanation. He says, However, the thought of Chandrakirti's commentary is that the first is to be taken as the great vehicle enlightenment, and the second as the path proceeding to it. So, I don't know if that's such an important point, but anyway, there are different views about that verse. And then there's an objection and response. Objection. Even bodhisattvas would absurdly have to be lower vehicle hero proclaimers because they hear the path of Buddhahood from Buddhas and proclaim it to trainees. So somebody says, well, if hearers are those who hear about the path to enlightenment and then proclaim it to others, then bodhisattvas would be hearers as well. That's kind of strange. The response says there's no such fault because the thought is that hearer proclaimers just proclaim the great vehicle path, but do not themselves achieve even a similitude of it. Okay, so that idea is wrong because there's a difference between bodhisattvas and hearers. Hearers hear about the Mahayana and proclaim it to others, but they don't practice it. Whereas bodhisattvas do hear about it, proclaim it to others, but they practice it. They're actually practicing the path and attaining the realizations of the path. Is that clear? I don't know. People bring up these points, I guess. Lots of things to debate about in the text. Okay, so then he goes on to talk about the solitary realizers and why they are called that. But in the text, in Chandrakirti's text, he doesn't use the term solitary realizer. Instead, he uses the term medium realizers of suchness. Medium realizers of suchness. And, okay, so he says, about the translation of medium realizers of suchness into Tibetan as medium Buddhas, Sangye Jing. So I guess somebody translated that term from Sanskrit into Tibetan and they said medium Buddhas. Medium-sized Buddhas. Big Buddhas, small Buddhas, medium-sized Buddhas, I don't know. In accordance with the meaning of Chandrakirti, saying in his commentary that Tattva Buddha, so I guess that's the Sanskrit term, Tattva Buddha, applies to all three persons, that is, hearer, solitary realizer, and Buddha. So I think Tattva Buddha is the term for realizer of suchness. Tattva Buddha means a realizer of suchness. So that applies to all those three persons, hearers and solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, the Mahayana. Because according to this school, according to the Prasangika school, all three realize suchness. Suchness is another term for emptiness. So according to this school, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas all realize suchness. They have to realize suchness. They have to realize emptiness to reach their goal. So that term, a realizer of suchness, applies to all three. And then, what does it say? It is good to take this term as in the identification by some that Tattva Buddha, realization of suchness, applies to all three. For when in accordance with the statement that Tattva is suchness and Buddha is realization, it is taken that realization of suchness is the meaning of the term Tattva Buddha. This applies to all three persons, and hence the term realizers of suchness also denotes solitary realizers. Whereas this is the case, it was translated into Tibetan as Sangye Buddha. Although in general the term Buddha is translated as Sangye, that's the Tibetan term for Buddha, it is inappropriate in this context. I don't know why. It doesn't say. But then he says, since it is also explained that the term Buddha is used to indicate the spreading of lotus petals and awakening from sleep, it is not necessary to translate it only as Buddha. So I'm not completely sure everything he's saying here, but the normal term in Tibetan that I've come across, the term used for solitary realizer is Rang. What is it? Rang Sangye. Rang Sangye. Prateka Buddha. In Sanskrit, there's the term Prateka Buddha, which has the sense of self-enlightened, self-illuminated. And I think it's because they are the ones who make this vow that they will not attain enlightenment in the world when the Buddha is here, but in some future time when there's no Buddha in the world. So they're kind of alone, no Buddha in the world, and they reach their goal of nirvana at that time. So that's why they're called self-realizers or solitary realizers. So, I don't know, I guess this is talking about the terminology between Sanskrit and Tibetan, so maybe it doesn't really apply to all of us. But the last point he makes here is that the term Buddha or Sangye doesn't have to refer to a fully enlightened one, because it's sometimes used even for lotus petals opening up or waking up from sleep. So just because the word Buddha is used doesn't mean, it's a fully enlightened being. I mean, for myself, for example, I was given the name Sangye, but that doesn't mean I'm a Buddha. So I know a number of other people who had the Tibetan name of Sangye. Lama Zopa Rinpoche's brother is named Sangye, and he's a layperson, he's not even a monk. So the word Sangye can be used as a name, and just because someone is called Sangye doesn't mean they're fully enlightened. So it's the same with the Prateka Buddhas, or they do have the word Buddha in their term, but that doesn't mean they are fully enlightened Buddhas like Shakyamuni Buddha. Anyway, so there's different discussions about why they're called what they are. But here, anyway, Chandrakirti uses this term, middling or medium realizers of suchness. Okay, and then he goes on to say, with respect to the meaning of medium, self-victors, rangyal, that's another term for solitary realizers, surpass hearers through their feature of increased reliance on practicing merit and wisdom for 100 eons. But since they do not have the two collections of merit and wisdom, nor the compassion engaging all sentient beings at all times, nor omniscience and so forth, they are inferior to perfect Buddhas, hence they are medium. Okay, so why is the word medium used? Because they're somewhat superior to hearers, because they spend more time accumulating merit. They spend 100 eons accumulating merit and wisdom. So they're superior to hearers, but they're lower than fully enlightened Buddhas, like Shakyamuni Buddha, because they don't have, it says here, they don't have the two collections of merit and wisdom. So there's something about that comes later. In fact, hearers and solitary realizers do collect merit and wisdom. So it can be said that they do have the two collections, but they don't have the fully qualified two collections of merit and wisdom, which it comes a bit later. But the fully qualified collections of merit and wisdom are done on the basis of great compassion. Collecting merit, collecting wisdom with a motivation of great compassion. So bodhisattvas do that. So bodhisattvas have the fully qualified collections of merit and wisdom, because everything they do is motivated by great compassion. But the hearers and solitary realizers, even though they do collect merit and wisdom, they don't do it on the basis of great compassion. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. So that's why they're called medium or middling. Okay. And then the next paragraph, top of page 11, says, again, Jayananda, a certain Jayananda's proposition, that the meaning of solitary realizers surpassing hearers in terms of wisdom accords with the statement in Maitreya's Ornament for the Clear Realizations. This is the Abbey. They abandon the conception of apprehended objects by realizing that object and subject are not different entities is not reasonable, because here in the consequentialist system it is said that the realizations that all phenomena do not inherently exist occurs in both hearers and solitary realizers. Okay, so I talked about this last week, that in the Svatantrika Madhyamika system, it said that hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas have different wisdoms that they mainly meditate on and develop. And the hearers mainly meditate on selflessness of persons, absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. That's their main object of meditation, and they realize that and attain their respective enlightenment. Solitary realizers meditate on what's sometimes a short form is called non-duality, meaning the absence of subject and object being different entities. That's a view in the Chittamatra school, but also in the Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamika school. You know, that there's no external objects. So whatever we see is just a kind of projection of our mind, coming from a seed in our mind. So according to the Svatantrika Madhyamika, solitary realizers meditate on that, in addition to selflessness of persons. So they gain a greater wisdom than hearers do. And then bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of true existence of all phenomena. So they have an even greater degree of wisdom. So that's a view of the Svatantrika Madhyamika school. And this text, The Ornament for Clear Realization by Maitreya, is according to that school. So in that text, this is how it's explained. This is the difference between hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying Jayananda is talking about that, but that isn't correct, because here we're talking about the consequentialist system, the prasangika system. And in our system, this system, all three types of followers, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, all have to meditate on the emptiness of inherent existence. Does that make sense? It's a little complicated, but yeah. And then he says at the end, because even the one who proposes the above, namely Jayananda himself, asserts this tenet. So Jayananda himself is a follower of the Prasangika school, because he says later that hearers and solitary realizers realize the emptiness of all phenomena. So anyway, that's not a valid way of distinguishing hearers and solitary realizers, according to Prasangika school. If you have questions, just interrupt me, otherwise I'm going to just keep going. Yeah.
So does this mean that even though the lower schools do meditate on their separate objects, but they still realize the emptiness of inherent existence, according to the Prasangika school? Like they, in the Svatantrika system, they do say that they only need to meditate on the lack of a self-sufficient, substantial existence self, but they still realize the lack of inherent existence, so they don't.
No, according to, it's only the Prasangika school. They are unique in saying that hearers and solitary realizers and bodhisattvas all have to realize emptiness of inherent existence in order to get out of samsara. Just to get out of samsara, you have to realize that. So the other schools don't say that. They say, in fact, below the Svatantrika, they say that all they have to do is realize this emptiness or this selflessness of persons. There's no substantially existent person. That's enough to get out of samsara.
I guess my question is that if people following the fundamental vehicle, where their teachings only explicitly say the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, but people who do practice that do attain arhatship.
Yeah.
So therefore, they're practicing the teachings that only explain lack of a self-sufficient, explicitly explain the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, yet somehow they are realizing, according to the Prasangika school, they have to realize lack of an inherent existence.
So how do they do it?
Well, I just wanted to get clear that the Prasangika would say that their tenet system is only this, but somehow still they're realizing it anyway. Is that?
Yeah, well, later in the text, there's a whole section about that where Chandrakirti points out different reasons to back this assertion. And he points out places in the sutras, like the fundamental vehicle sutras, where the Buddha does teach emptiness. Although he doesn't say this is the emptiness of inherent existence, but he is talking about that. So even in their own sutras, there are places where the Buddha teaches emptiness, and they are able to realize emptiness on the basis of that. Is that your question?
I just don't know it.
Huh? Well, I can, if you want, I have a file, someone put together a file that kind of summarizes all these points. So I can send that to you, just if you're not convinced or you want to see more evidence of that. But yeah, he goes into reasoning as well. So he gives both by scripture and by reasoning. He what is the word? Verifies this view, validates this view. Yeah. It isn't just, because Nagarjuna said so or because I say so, but, there are reasons for asserting that.
I remember Venerable Chodron says there's a difference between the philosophical schools and then the actual practices of the different traditions. So maybe the philosophical schools are saying, we need to realize this, but then, the people following the Pali tradition, they also meditate on emptiness of phenomena or lack of inherent existence. And the Buddha, one of his first teachings was the 3 marks of existence. He said all conditioned phenomena are non-self. So it's right there, right at the beginning. So it always puzzles me why they would say that they don't think that phenomena lack a self.
Well, it just depends on what kind of self is being refuted. Because the word self could refer to permanent, independent self, or it could refer to a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or it could refer to inherent existence. Okay, so that term self, what do you mean by that? What kind of self is being refuted?
The phenomena part is included. It's not just, he didn't say just persons lack of self. He said all conditioned phenomena.
Well, I think in the tenets, when we studied tenets, it said that even the lower schools would say that even though they're mainly talking about selflessness of persons, but that can be extended to phenomena in the sense that, like my computer has a kind of selflessness. It's not an object of use by a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. So I don't know. There's lots of different points about this, but one thing I was going to say too, according to Prasangika school, if a hearer or solitary realizer has attained arhatship, okay, then they are actually prasangikas, even though they may not say I'm a prasangika. But if they've attained arhatship, that means they've realized emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena. Okay, so they're actually prasangikas, whatever they say about their own tenet system. I think that's correct. I have to check that, but yeah. So you could be in the hearer vehicle and be a prasangika. You could also be in the Mahayana vehicle and be a vaibhashika or a sutrantika, depending on. It also isn't just a question of what tenet you hold, but also where you're at. You may say, I'm a prasangika, but if we're still strongly grasping at things as inherently existing, we're kind of prasangika in name, but in terms of where we're at and what's really going on in our mind, it's a little doubtful to say we're prasangika. So, yeah, there's different variations among the different tenet systems, as well as the vehicles. It's very complicated. Okay, then where are we? Oh yeah, in his commentary, Chandrakirti says that a solitary realizer's wisdom surpasses in its increase that of a hearer. This increase should be taken to mean progress on the path advances higher and higher. It's a little unclear what this actually means, but I found in the commentary, the contemporary commentary by Geshe Jamba Gyatso, said that the meaning of this is that the solitary realizers, so both the hearers and solitary realizers are attaining nirvana or liberation. That means they free their minds from all the afflictive obscurations, ignorance and all the disturbing emotions. So they've totally eliminated the afflictive obscurations. So from that point of view, they are the same. Hearers and solitary realizers are the same. But he says the solitary realizer's attainment is superior because their realization continues to increase over time, whereas the hearer's realization does not. So I guess that's what Chandrakirti or Lama Tsongkhapa here is saying, that this wisdom surpasses in its increase. So it increases, it grows over time. The progress on the path advances higher and higher. And so this is because they spend more time cultivating merit and wisdom. They spend 100 eons on the path, whereas hearers can reach their goal in, I think the minimum is 3 lifetimes. So that's fast, but then the level of their wisdom would not be as great or strong as the solitary realizers. Oh, another thing he said too about solitary realizers, actually a student asked this and then he answered, because according to our school, hearers and solitary realizers reach nirvana, liberation, but they don't stop there. The Buddha will come and wake them up and say, hey, you haven't finished your work, you got more work to do. So then they have to enter the Mahayana and progress on the Mahayana to enlightenment. So he said, here, solitary realizers, when they do enter the Mahayana, will take less time to reach enlightenment than hearers. So that's another plus. They've spent all that time accumulating merit and wisdom. Well, they'll get to enlightenment faster than the hearers. And then the end of that paragraph, he says, concerning this, solitary realizers are intent on cultivating merit and wisdom over 100 eons. Unlike the hearers, they are not unable to lengthen cultivation of the path. Okay, then he says, Chandrakirti says that solitary realizers do not have the 2 collections of merit and wisdom. However, they do have secondary or imputed collections. I wonder where these words in brackets come from. Maybe Jamyang Shepa. I think Jeffrey often uses the text of Jamyang Shepa and puts things in. And then it says, although there are indeed cases of using the mere term collection for merit and wisdom in general, the principal usage of the term collection is for fully qualified merit and wisdom, as in the statement in Haribhadra's clear meaning commentary. So that commentary is a commentary to the Abbey Samalamkara. That a collection is what holds the fruit due to being a means of an unmistakably achieving highest enlightenment. And the quotation is, by being entities of thorough achievement, they hold a great enlightenment. Therefore, great compassion and so forth are collections. Anyway, the point here is talking about this expression collection like the two collections, right? We talk about the two collections. A bodhisattva has to create these two collections, or accumulate these two collections of merit and wisdom. Merit mainly means generating compassion, love, bodhicitta, practicing generosity, helping sentient beings. So that's one of the two collections that needs to be done to reach enlightenment. It's like one wing of the bird. And the other collection is wisdom, which is to learn about, meditate on, and develop the wisdom, realizing emptiness. So that's the other wing of the bird. So the bodhisattva needs these two wings to reach enlightenment. If you only have one, but you miss the other, you're not going to get there. So mainly we talk about the two collections in terms of the bodhisattva's path. But what's being said here is that hearers and solitary realizers also have two collections. They have merit and wisdom. When we were studying the Abbey, our teacher said that for them, merit or method, the method side of the path is renunciation. The practice of renunciation and overcoming attachment to samsara and so forth. So that's their main method side of the path. And then the wisdom side of the path is developing the realization of selflessness. So they too have the two collections. But what it's saying here is that the collections of hearers and solitary realizers are called secondary or imputed collections. They're not fully qualified collections, because the fully qualified collections are those of the bodhisattvas that are done on the basis of great compassion. The motivation is great compassion, wanting to help all sentient beings be free of suffering. So that's why a bodhisattva is accumulating these two things. Whereas in the case of hearers and solitary realizers, they're accumulating these two things to get themselves out of samsara, to reach nirvana, liberation. So the motivation behind the two accumulations is different. And I'm reading Venerable Children's, is it volume 5 we're doing now? Yeah, volume 5. And there's just a section about that in that book. It's all about bodhicitta and the 6 perfections. Really nice. Okay, is that clear? Okay, then forget the green words. The next paragraph says, the two, that is merit and wisdom, that do not contain this meaning great compassion, are secondary collections. This, moreover, is the meaning when the original Sanskrit for the collection, sambara, is explained by way of contextual identity, etymology, sorry. So he's talking about the Sanskrit term sambara, that's the word for collection. So unless you're a Sanskrit scholar, maybe you don't need to know about that. Okay, then it says, because solitary realizers' progress in merit and wisdom greatly exceeds that of hearers, they are able to generate the wisdom of a foe destroyer during their final lifetime in the desire realm without depending on another master's teaching. And they become enlightened, that is to say, have attained or are in the process of attaining the state of a foe destroyer for their own sakes alone, and due to which they are called self-enlightened, Rang Sangye, and also self-arisen, Rang Jung. There seem to be a lot of different terms for solitary realizers. Yeah. I think one of the classes with Jeffrey, didn't he say something like they do want to become Buddhas, but they only want to become Buddhas for themselves, not for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's why they don't make it all the way. Well, it's clear that, if I want to become Buddha, but if you don't have that motivation of bodhicitta, wanting to do it for the sake of all sentient beings, wanting to help all sentient beings, you won't be able to get there. You won't be able to make it. So it's clear that bodhicitta is an essential ingredient to reach full enlightenment. Okay, so that's it for solitary realizers. And then he goes on to talk about this phrase, monarchs of subduers, which is in that first line. He doesn't say Buddhas. He says monarchs of subduers. The term subduer is indeed also used for hearer and solitary realizer, foe destroyers. I think it's Bhagawan in Tibetan. Oh, sorry, in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, it's Chomdende. But since they are not monarchs of subduers, only Buddhas are called monarchs of subduers, because Buddhas have attained an excellent lordship of doctrines superior to hearers, solitary realizers, or even bodhisattvas, and because the word of Buddha has dominion over these three in the sphere of doctrine. So subduer, the word subduer can refer, I think it means literally, one who has subdued or overcome or eliminated ignorance and the afflictive emotions. So you've totally transformed your mind and gotten rid of the disturbing emotions, ignorance, anger, greed, and so forth. So that's the meaning of subduer. So that's true for Buddhas, and it's also true for foe destroyers, or arhats. Here in solitary realizer, arhats. But only the Buddha is the king or monarch of subduers, because the Buddhas have attained a far superior state of realization, and also over teachings. The word of a Buddha is much more powerful and genuine than that of because the two kinds of obscurations. Talk about, there's different terminology, afflictive obscurations, and then knowledge obscurations. Venerable uses the term cognitive obscurations, which I don't like. But anyway, so do you know what's involved in those two? What's included in those? So afflictive obscurations or...
Afflictions and seeds. Afflictions and their seeds.
Yeah, so all the afflictions, ignorance, greed, hatred, jealousy, pride, all the different kinds of afflictive emotions or afflictive states of mind, and the seeds of them. So even the seeds have been wiped out. So there's never any possibility that they will arise again. They're totally gone forever. And they will never return. So that's what you need to eliminate to reach nirvana, to get out of samsara and attain nirvana. And then the other type of obscuration, cognitive obscurations or knowledge obscurations. The more better term is obscurations to omniscience. Those are the ones that prevent the attainment of full enlightenment or Buddhahood. And then, according to different schools, those are explained differently. According to Prasangika, the knowledge obscurations are tendencies, latencies, tendencies in the mind. The analogy of the smell of the garlic, like even after you've gotten rid of the garlic or the onions and washed the pot, the smell is still there, it lingers there for a while. So even after eliminating all the defilements, the afflictive obscurations, ignorance, and so forth, there's still tendencies to see things as truly existing, inherently existing, and so on. So those are still in the mind. They have to be wiped out. So this is what bodhisattvas do. Bodhisattvas eliminate those, and that's why they are able to attain Buddhahood, whereas the hearers and solitary realizers only eliminate the afflictive obscurations. And in relation to that, last week there was a point in the text when it mentioned limitless kinds of reasonings for realizing emptiness. That was one of the ways, and it was talked about as one of the ways in which Chandrakiri's text supplements Nagarjuna's, although it was refuted actually because Nagarjuna's has more reasonings. It was in relation to Nagarjuna's text itself. How can we know it's a great vehicle text because it has lots and lots of reasonings. And bodhisattvas, need lots and lots of reasonings to realize emptiness, whereas hearers and solitary realizers do not. And I was talking about why it is that bodhisattvas need so many reasonings, and I put out the idea that maybe it's because they will then be teaching sentient beings, and they need lots of reasons to be able to teach sentient beings how to realize emptiness. So that was just my idea. So I looked into the commentaries, and I didn't come across that anywhere. So I guess that's only my idea. It may be true. Yeah? Okay. So it might be true, but it's not what's normally said. So instead, what Geshe Jamba Gyatso in his commentary said, it's because bodhisattvas need to wipe out the second kinds of obscurations, and knowledge obscurations or obscurations to omniscience. So they need, more powerful wisdom to get rid of those, whereas hearers and solitary realizers only get rid of the first kinds of obscurations, the afflictive ones. So that was the reason that he gave as to why they need limitless reasons. But I like the other one too. Just so you know, it's it's not in any of these texts. Maybe somewhere else. Is that clear? Okay, so then we go on to this point about how it is that hearers and solitary realizers are born from the monarchs of subduers. So that's what that first line says. Hearers and solitary realizers are born from monarchs of subduers, meaning Buddhas. So how are they born from Buddhas? So Lama Tsongkhapa says the meaning of that is they are issued forth by them. So there's a question: how do monarchs of subduers issue forth hearers and solitary realizers? Response: when Buddhas come to the world, and there's some bullet points, they engage in teaching dependent arising without error, and those bearing the lineage of hearers and solitary realizers listen to the modes of dependent arising, think about what they have heard, and meditate on the meaning of what they have thought about. So those three things: hearing, thinking, and meditating. And then through such stages, the wishes of hearers and solitary realizers are fulfilled in accordance with the effect to which they aspire. In other words, they reach their goals. So Buddhas teach dependent arising, and these beings listen to that, think about it, meditate on it, and then their minds are transformed. They reach their goals of nirvana, liberation, whatever you want to call it. So that is how they are born from the Buddhas. They're born from the Buddha's words, the Buddha's teachings. So that's how monarchs of subduers give birth to those two types of beings. Now, an objection. Although many in the hearer lineage actualize enlightenment in the very life in which they listen to the doctrine from a Buddha, those of the solitary realizer lineage do not actualize their enlightenment in that very lifetime. Hence, it is incorrect that their wishes are fulfilled through hearing, thinking, and meditating on meanings set forth by a subduer. So because they reach their enlightenment some lifetimes later, then it's not right to say they were born from the Buddhas. That's the objection, I think. The response: there is no fault. Because although some bearing the lineage of solitary realizers become skilled in realizing the ultimate from only hearing the teachers setting forth dependent arising, they indeed do not attain their nirvana of a solitary realizer in just that present life during which they hear the doctrine. Nevertheless, even though solitary realizer practitioners to whom a Buddha teaches dependent arising do not attain nirvana in this lifetime, they will just definitely attain nirvana in another life. As is the case with the fact that although one who has accumulated an action, the effect of which must be experienced, does not experience the effect in just that life when the karma was accumulated, nevertheless the effect will definitely be experienced in another birth. So he's bringing in, the teachings on karma, where we create an action in one lifetime, and the result of that action may not arise for many lifetimes, could be even hundreds or thousands or millions of lifetimes later, but we still say that that effect arose from this cause. So there's nothing wrong with saying that the effect doesn't happen in the same lifetime. The effect can happen in many, many, many lifetimes later, but it's still the effect of this cause. Okay? So cause and effect don't have to be immediate. The effect doesn't have to arise immediately. So just as that is the case with karma, it's also the case with the solitary realizers. Because even if they don't attain their goal of nirvana for many, many lifetimes after they hear the word of the Buddha, still that was the cause. Hearing the Buddha's teachings about dependent arising and then thinking about them, meditating on them, that became the cause for their result, which arose many lifetimes later. So it's still valid to say that they're born from the Buddhas. That's the point. It's a good point. And the next bullet point is because since solitary realizers hear, think, and meditate on just the doctrine formerly taught by a Buddha, the explanation that their wishes are fulfilled is not given in consideration of this life only. In this way, Aryadeva's 400 says, though those who know suchness do not attain nirvana here, in another birth they will definitely attain it without striving, as in the case of actions whose effects are definite to be attained. Okay, so that's like a quotation from Aryadeva that kind of validates this point. And Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle says, though the perfect Buddhas do not appear, and hearers also have disappeared, the solitary realizer's pristine wisdom arises without support. Meaning, I guess, at that point in time, in that lifetime, they don't need to meet a Buddha and listen to Buddha's teachings in order for their realization to arise, because they already have all this accumulated wisdom in their mind, wisdom and merit. So their realization of their enlightenment can arise without, needing a Buddha to be there. With respect to the meaning of this, is that clear? It's going to another point now. So with respect to the meaning of this statement in Chandrakirti's commentary, there are some who, so down in the footnote B, he gives the complete statement in Chandrakirti's auto-commentary. There are some who, although they have become skilled in realizing the ultimate from only hearing the teaching of dependent arising, indeed do not attain nirvana in just this lifetime. Nevertheless, it is certain that practitioners of the teaching will attain a fruition of the wished-for effect in another lifetime, as is the case with the effect of an action, the fruition of which is definite. And then he gives the same quotations from Aryadeva and Nagarjuna. So with regard to that statement in Chandrakirti's auto-commentary, one, Jayananda again, asserts that it indicates an answer to, it is seen that though dependent arising is taught, some do not achieve the ranks of hearers and so forth. Hence, hearers and so forth will not fulfill their desired aim, attainment of foe destroyer, through the teaching of dependent arising. I don't know who says that, but somebody seems to say that there are some who listen to the Buddha's teachings but still don't reach their goal. And then others, that is Tibetans, explain that this indicates an answer to, whereas it would be reasonable for that fruit to arise immediately after practicing the meaning of dependent arising or non-production, it does not. And therefore, the fruit also will not be produced later. Again, who says that? I don't know. But it's contrary to what Chandrakirti is saying, because Chandrakirti is, and Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, they're all saying that even if the fruit doesn't arise immediately, it will definitely arise later, sometime, even after many lifetimes. So then Lama Tsongkhapa says, these are explanations by those who have not understood the meaning of this section. He's saying that these are not correct explanations, because since there are greater qualms about the monarchs of subduers giving birth to solitary realizers, qualms about this should be singled out and eliminated, but they did not do so. And then down in the footnote it says, Tsongkhapa's problem with these two explanations of the challenge that Chandrakirti is answering is that they view the challenge and therefore the response as concerned with both hearers and solitary realizers, whereas Tsongkhapa views Chandrakirti's concern as being only with solitary realizers, since they necessarily do not become foe destroyers in the presence of a Buddha. Anyway, these seem to be fine points of maybe hard for us to fully understand, but there's probably in the text, scholars saying all these different things. So Lama Tsongkhapa is just trying to clear up their confusion. So the next section is how Buddhas are born from Bodhisattvas. So any questions about the previous section before we move on? So far we've only been looking at the first line of verse 1, which says, you can see how much you can find in there, which, is talking about hearers and solitary realizers being born from Buddhas. How? And so on and so forth.
I was just wondering if it's ever stated why solitary realizers want to teach the Mahayana when they don't practice it. It's
Actually the hearers.
I mean the hearers.
Yeah.
What's their motivation for doing that? Has it ever come across that?
I haven't heard that, but I mean, when I was in Singapore, I knew this monk from Sri Lanka. He was the head of the Buddhist library in Singapore, very wonderful monk and teacher. And he said in Sri Lanka, even though it's like a Theravada country, there are monks who take the Bodhisattva vow. And I mean, they do know about the Bodhisattva path and respect it, obviously. And then some even decide they're going to follow it. So even though they're not in a Mahayana tradition, but they're inspired by that and decide, okay, I'm going to do that too. So they take the Bodhisattva vow and, commit themselves to becoming Buddhas. So to me, that just indicated that there isn't such a strict division between Theravada and Mahayana. And obviously in the Theravada tradition, they do know about the Bodhisattva path, because obviously Buddha himself followed that. That's the path he followed. And there could be some who just feel, wow, that's fantastic, and I want to do that too. So maybe that's the reason. They do respect it very much. They do want to talk about it. They do want to, let people know about this wonderful path. And then some people might be inspired to follow it themselves.
I can certainly share it with people, but one of the gifts that I got when I went into the retreat this winter, Kathy Elton sent me a book by Bhikkhu Analayo, and it's called The Genesis of the Bodhisattva Ideal. He goes through the sutras, so I'd be more than happy. I think you could get it online. I'd be more than happy to send it, because I have had that same question. I'm working my way slowly through it. It's a lot of quotations, but it evidently gives instances where the Buddha did declare that the Bodhisattva ideal kind of arose through some of the sutras. Anyway. I'm more than happy to share that.
Yeah, and I once met he was a French monk who had spent something like 25 years in Burma and Thailand, so very much in that tradition. And I'm just trying to remember, we had conversations about Mahayana and so on, and he said he just has trouble accepting the Mahayana sutras when he reads them. They're so different. They're really, really different from the Theravada Sutras. So he has trouble with that. And I don't remember if I heard that from him or from somewhere else, but I mean, in the Theravada Sutras, the Buddha kind of doesn't say everybody has to reach enlightenment. His main emphasis is on getting out of samsara, reaching nirvana. So that was his message to those followers or those people. So I think they just think, well, that's good enough. It's not really necessary for everyone to reach enlightenment. It's enough that there are some who reach enlightenment and then, help to guide others out of samsara. But why does everybody have to reach enlightenment? I mean, we have an answer to that in our tradition, but, from their point of view, it's just not necessary for everybody. Maybe it's a bit like, if there's a building that's on fire and there's lots of people inside and there's firefighters and rescue workers trying to get everybody out. So the people who get out don't necessarily join in the work, of bringing everybody else out. I mean, there's some who might, chip in and help the firefighters, but there's others who just, go home or go to the hospital or whatever. They've gotten themselves out, but it's not necessary for every single person who gets out of the burning building to help all the others. I don't know. Maybe that's not a very good analogy, but. And yeah, I mean, it does take a certain type of person to have that feeling, that I want to help everybody else. I mean, that is really a huge job. If we really look into what is involved in reaching enlightenment. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I want to become a Buddha. But then when you really look at what you have to do to become a Buddha, whether it's the Sutra path or the Tantra path, it's huge. It's a huge, unbelievable job. So I think it's understandable that some may feel, that's not for me, I can't do that. But I mean, in the Abhisamalamkara, it says it's you're going to have to reach enlightenment anyway, and if you first reach nirvana, it takes much longer in the long run because you get stuck in the bliss of nirvana for a really, really, really long time. And then the Buddha's going to not let you stay there. He's going to wake you up and say, come on, keep going. And then you have to enter the Mahayana. And you have to start right from the beginning of the Mahayana path, the path of accumulation. You have to go all the way through the 5 paths of Mahayana. So it means time-wise, you spend much more time reaching enlightenment that way than if you just start from the Mahayana right from the beginning. So that's the rationale for doing the Mahayana from the beginning. But anyway.
So for the hearers and solitary realizers who are recruited into the Mahayana path, they're already liberated, so they don't have any afflictions. Is that right?
That's right.
So
but they still have to accumulate a lot of merit. They have to generate.
But it would be like wonderful. It wouldn't really be a burden for them at all, I wouldn't think. They have no afflictions.
Yeah, that's right. They've realized emptiness, their mind's free of afflictions, but they still have to generate bodhicitta and then cultivate all the merit side of the path, the method side of the path to get to enlightenment. So starting from point 0, the amount of time they spend first going to nirvana, staying in nirvana for a long time because it's so blissful, then entering Mahayana. It's like, they're taking a big detour. So they're spending more time to reach enlightenment, whereas the Bodhisattvas spend less time going all the way to enlightenment. That's, yeah.
The people who would be at the disadvantage from that is all the other sentient beings. because the individual practitioner, like I said, if they have no attachment, they have no aversion, they're just going to have joy accumulating all that merit after they're liberated.
Well, they say the bodhisattvas have a lot of joy too. Once you generate genuine bodhicitta, you're happy, you're happy to help sentient beings. And then when you reach the first bhumi, you become an Arya Bodhisattva. They say that the name of that, the term for that first bhumi is the very joyful. They're just incredibly blissful to be helping sentient beings with this realization of emptiness. So that's a happy path too. The beginning at our level is still hard work, we're dragging ourselves along, but at some point when bodhicitta becomes uncontrived and spontaneous, then, they say bodhisattvas are happy even to give away their body, even to be thrown into prison, even, So, there's joy in this path too. Let's go a little bit further, if you're okay with that, into the next section, which is how Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, which is the second line of that verse. So there's a question. If hearers and solitary realizers are born from monarchs and subduers, from what are the monarchs and subduers born? In response, the perfect Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. Objection. Are bodhisattvas not called conqueror children because they are born from being taught by the Buddhas? Since bodhisattvas are conqueror children, how is it reasonable that Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas? For example, it's not reasonable that the father of a child be born from that child. It's a good point. Because there is that term. Another term for bodhisattva is children of the conquerors, children of the Buddhas. So now you're saying, wait a minute, Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas? How does that work? Okay, now, response. That bodhisattvas are the children of certain conquerors is indeed true. However, there are two reasons why bodhisattvas are causes of Buddhas. Concerning this, the first, the way bodhisattvas are causes of Buddhas from the feature of state, that's the term used in Chandrakirti's commentary, is because the state of a one gone thus is the fruit of a state of a bodhisattva. This indicates that a bodhisattva is a cause of a Buddha by way of continuity of substantial causes in the same continuum as this Buddha, in that all whatsoever attained states of a Buddha are attained only through formerly having developed the states of a bodhisattva on the path of learning. So to put that in simple language, a Buddha was once a bodhisattva. Without a person having generated bodhicitta and followed the bodhisattva's path, there would be no Buddha. So bodhisattva is the substantial cause. Do you know that term, substantial cause? Substantial cause is what transforms into the result. Like when you make a clay pot, the clay is the substantial cause of the pot. It's what transforms into the pot. So the substantial cause of a Buddha is a bodhisattva. So that's one way in which we can say a Buddha or Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. That's not too difficult to understand. Next point, this is the second way that the way bodhisattvas are causes of Buddhas, from encouraging thorough apprehension, is that, as it says in Sutra, the foremost holy Manjushri, as a bodhisattva, caused our own teacher and Buddhas other than him to take hold of the altruistic mind of enlightenment at the very beginning. This establishes that Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas from the viewpoint that a bodhisattva, who is of a different continuum from the Buddhahood that another bodhisattva will attain, acts as a cooperative cause of that Buddha. So, what that's saying is, another way that bodhisattvas are the cause of Buddhas, Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, is because, for example, Shakyamuni Buddha, before he was Buddha, when he was a bodhisattva, he was encouraged by other bodhisattvas like Manjushri. He said, yes, you must, I don't know what it said, but anyway, something like some encouragement, to develop bodhicitta and follow the bodhisattva's path. So other bodhisattvas were encouraging him in his work, and in that way helped him to finally become a Buddha, attain Buddhahood. So in that way, bodhisattvas are cooperative conditions, or it says cooperative causes, cooperative conditions of Buddhas. So in addition to substantial causes, there's also cooperative conditions. Like if you're making a clay pot, you have this raw material, clay, but then you have, tools, and you have water, and you have the kiln where you fire it. So those are all cooperative conditions that help bring about the result. Or in the case of a plant, the substantial cause is the seed that turns into the plant, but you also need water and soil and sunshine, and so those are the cooperative conditions. So this is talking about how bodhisattvas are like cooperative conditions for Buddhas to emerge, to arise, to be born. They help other bodhisattvas progress along the path and turn into Buddhas. Does that make sense? That's not too difficult. So that's how Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. Two ways that Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas transforming into Buddhas, other bodhisattvas encouraging them to become Buddhas. Do you want to stop here? It's 20 past already. Because then it gets into some kind of discussion, objections, response. It gets a little complicated. We can do that next week. Is that okay? Okay, any last questions before we...
Are there any famous Buddhas who were arhats prior to their Buddhahood?
I haven't heard of any. We're still working on it. Maybe. Yeah. But maybe also because within the Mahayana, because they are encouraging people to, right from the beginning of their career to generate the strong bodhicitta and follow that path. So maybe they prefer talking about those individuals rather than the ones who first, went the other way and then went to Buddhahood. I don't know. I mean, that's just my guess. But, there must be those who first became arhats and then became Buddhas. Yeah, right. Yeah, way back in the other eons.
So, an arhat is also known as a foe destroyer, correct? But in the praise to the Buddha, he's also called a foe destroyer.
Yeah.
So I wonder why.
Well, because that term, foe destroyer, or arhat, refers to somebody who's free of samsara, who's liberated from samsara. And so that applies to the Buddha as well. Just because he's gone further than just that, he still is an arhat. So the term arhat does apply to the Buddha as well. That makes sense? So yeah, those verses pointing out all the different qualities of a Buddha, all his different achievements. I mean, it's skillful, I think, especially for those who are followers of that Theravada or fundamental vehicle, just to understand, well, Buddha is an arhat. I mean, they have no doubt about that, but just to emphasize that, he has also completely eliminated all the afflictions and is out of samsara and doesn't have any more suffering and causes of suffering. But on top of that, he has gone further than that. I don't know, I was thinking of, for example, a psychiatrist, okay? To be a psychiatrist, you have to be a medical doctor, right? You have to be an MD. But then on top of that, you do further studies, you get further degrees. So a psychiatrist is still a doctor, even though he or she is a psychiatrist, right? It's kind of like that.
Following the reasoning, it could be doubtful logic on my part. But so if we want to know an instance of an arhat who became a Buddha, we could point out to Sakyamuni Buddha because he is a foe destroyer, who also is a Buddha. Is that not correct logic?
Yeah. Well, we say that if someone is following the Bodhisattva path, it's a long path, and they go through different stages. So among those stages are what are called the 10 bhumis, the 10 Bodhisattva bhumis or grounds. So when a Bodhisattva reaches bhumi number 8, they're at the level of an arhat. That's the point at which all the afflictive obscurations have been totally wiped out, but then they haven't finished their work because they want to eliminate the knowledge obscurations, the cognitive obscurations. So then they have 3 more bhumis to go to do that. So at the 8th level, a bodhisattva is equivalent to an arhat. But we wouldn't call, you don't use the term arhat for an 8th ground bodhisattva. The term arhat is only used for Buddha in the Mahayana tradition. You have to read. A Mahayana arhat is a Buddha and not a bodhisattva, not an 8th ground bodhisattva. It's, yeah.
Based on our discussion of solitary realizers, a bodhisattva on the 8th ground would have wisdom far surpassing that of hearers and solitary realizers because of the amount of merit and the various reasons that they've been using. So even though they're equivalent in terms of having eradicated the afflictions and their seeds, their wisdom would be not.
Yeah, there's another section about that coming out later in the text if we ever get to that. But yeah, relating to, I don't remember exactly the argument now, but yeah, the way in which bodhisattvas surpass hearers and solitary realizers at different stages of the path. But yeah, they do. So saying that a bodhisattva is at the level of an arhat when they're at the 8th ground, that's just in terms of having eliminated the afflictive obscurations and the seeds, all the disturbing emotions and the seeds. So they've all been eliminated. So from that point of view, they are equivalent. But in terms of wisdom, I think, yeah, we would say wisdom is greater. I think so. I'd have to check that. But I think, yeah, in terms of, and certainly in terms of their merit, their bodhicitta, and so on, they're superior.
Just regarding Tracy's question, in terms of specific arhats we have known, who get named in the sutras too, we don't actually know their level of attainment. Right? I mean, if it's so that Shakyamuni, from the Mahayana point of view, that Shakyamuni Buddha attained Buddhahood before he appeared and did this path, then we don't know how many of the so-called arhats also are in this same position. I mean, we can't even speculate. I only think of this.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying, like, for once, I don't know, I was talking to Venerable Children once about Mahaprajapati being an arhat, and she said, no, she was a Buddha. And so I really thought about that.
Is that in the text, or
no,
is that
it's
her
not
opinion?
In the text, it's her opinion. But why not? If Shakyamuni Buddha also lived that whole out as a demonstration for us, how do we know any of them that are called arhats or just called teachers don't also have those attainments? We just don't know, is my point.
I mean, they do say that. I've heard that about there's this group of 8 bodhisattvas who were in Buddha's retinue, among his disciples. They include all the famous ones, Manjushri and Maitreya and Vajrapani and Avalokiteshvara, all our friends. And so our teachers say they were actually Buddhas, but how do you say, manifesting or impersonating, or anyway, acting like Bodhisattva disciples of the Buddha, even though they were already Buddha, just to show others this is what Bodhisattvas look like. And so the same could be true. I don't know, I can't remember if I've actually heard this or not. The same could be true for some of the like Shariputra and Moggallana. Maybe they were Buddhas, but they were just impersonating, or that's not the right word. I'm trying to remember. Showing the aspect, yeah, acting like arhats. It's possible.
I guess I should have refined my question a little bit, because I asked Venerable Children once if one of those arhats who was lost in the blissful meditation of emptiness was, tapped by the Buddha to enter the great vehicle, if they had ever become what I asked her was, did the Buddha go through that stage where he reached nirvana and was lost in meditative absorption and then entered the Bodhisattva path? And she said no. So he was never in that state, lost in that stage, so to speak. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
But in this text, when it gets to chapter 8, which is about the 8th ground, the 8th bhumi, it does say in there that these bodhisattvas who've reached that level, the Buddha will kind of shine a light to them and remind them of their promise. Because it shows how kind of compelling it is to just get absorbed in that bliss of mind being totally free of all the defilements. And even at that, we were discussing this during class, like how could an 8th ground bodhisattva, after all those eons of accumulating merit and bodhicitta and so on, how could they still be in danger of that? So, but yeah, it must be just unbelievably blissful and really tempting to just stay there. So, yeah. No, it couldn't be. They've finished with attachment. Not attachment. Yeah, well, that's why we had trouble believing that they would need to be, roused and reminded of their vow, their promise. It seemed hard to believe. And they're totally free of self-centeredness. No more self-cherishing mind, no more attachment, no more ignorance believing in a real self. So I guess it just must be the strength of that experience of the mind being totally free of defilements. And the first time for beginningless time. We've never experienced that before. This is the first time our mind has been completely free of all those disturbing emotions and their seeds. So, yeah, unimaginable for us.
They're not innocent. If their only object is whatever's bringing bliss, why would a sentient being come to mind?
Well, just the power of having spent eons.
Two countless radians by the 8th ground.
Right.
Yeah, just eons, thinking about sentient beings with compassion and love and helping them and so on. How could they not think about it?